Yes, thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. This is absolutely terrific and an important subject, obviously, for everyone, but most importantly for the families. There's actually two parts to this question, and one of them has to do with school choice in Delaware. And there is a misperception between a misunderstanding between what school choice is in Delaware and what it is, anyway, generally speaking, today across the country. 1996-97 school year was the first year that the choice bill in Delaware passed. What that said is that you could take and decide to take your child out of a public school and move him to another public school in the district. Okay. Now, it also went on to say that the district would adopt the policies to be able to say the acceptance or the rejection of that student, as well as to set the priorities for they would decide each year what schools could be available for choice and so forth and so on. It really isn't choice in terms of the way that other states have practiced choice, okay? Because you just can't decide to go, and there's a very small percentage, I think it's like a couple of percent of choice students that move within the district, and there is some between districts, because a lot of it has to do with what schools are going to be available, what the criteria is, and the acceptance and rejection, and so forth. Choice as it's being applied in other states, and there is a book that looks like this in the back of the room, and if you don't have one, you might want to pick one up, because it summarizes some of the other states and their choice programs. You'll notice that Delaware is not in there because, and technically, in the way the ABC is school choice, it is not school choice. The way the other school choices work, there's various programs. Sometimes you hear referred to as vouchers, and what that is you can decide to move your child into another school, and the state gives a voucher and it goes to that school, but it's your choice on moving the child into the school. There are some limitations on that. Some of the limitations has to do with whether it can be faith-based or not, because it would create a religious problem if you avoid vouchers. Other programs that become very popular are things like scholarship programs. Scholarship programs, or Arizona has adopted, I think Connecticut's going to adopt, Indiana has got some programs that are called Education Empowerment Savings Accounts. And that's a program that actually Cesar Rodney Institute advocates. And the way the programs work is that you, the parent, decide where you want your child to go. Okay? It can be a public school. It could be a private school. It could be a faith-based school. And the state takes a percentage of the money that has already been allocated for your child's education, and in the case of an education empowerment savings account, deposit it into like a debit account. It's a restricted use. It can only be used for education. It can be used to pay for private school, faith-based schools. It can be used to pay for mentoring. It can be used, and in the case of what we would propose is that it also be carried over, so that if you don't use it all in a year, that you could carry it over. It could eventually become a college fund that you can use to fund education. So that's the Education Empowerment Savings Account. Much different than what people will tell you have in Delaware. We really don't. I think what we have is like a transfer program as opposed to a choice program. In Arizona, for example, what they do is they would allocate 90% of the amount of money that would be allocated for your child's education. So let me put it in terms of here in Wilmington. In the school district here, the average operating cost, not total cost, the operating cost, which would be the basis for the Education Empowerment Savings Account, is just slightly over $12,000 a year. Okay? If you took the 90% money, it would be $11,000 that would go into an account for you. You then decide where you want your child to go, and quarterly they recharge your debit account with it. Again, it's limited use, so it can't be misused, and it puts you in the position of being at the table for your child's education. I want to emphasize something. In and of itself, it doesn't solve anything. what it does is it puts you in a position to work with the teacher and develop that strong relationship to have that individual learning experience that you want to have for your child. Well done.
Thank you. All right, we got one more. Let's see what we do. Councilman Kelly, as a Wilmington City resident, city council member, and community activist, can you share your personal experiences of the correlation between the lack of education and violent crime?
I think everybody in here understands that when you do not have an education, sometimes you fall into the wrong hands in the city. I have a son who's here with me tonight, and we'll talk about the importance of education. But it's something we need to address, in the city of Wilmington. All too often when I'm out and playing ball in the park, on the streets, I see young people who just don't have an education, who are ending up with on the wrong side of the law. So I think that's an easy question. I think we all understand that there's a direct relation from that. But just to give you some statistical background for folks that don't know, the dropout rate, if you're a city resident and you go to Brandywine High School or Brandywine School District, you're 2.5 times more likely to be a dropout if you live in the city than in the Brandywine School District. If you're in Christina, you're 3 times as likely to drop out of school than someone who's outside the city of Christina. And if you're in Red Clay, it's 2 times. But the one that kind of gets me is the graduation rates, where we're not graduating our young people. Mr. Simpson and I are both African American. Let's just say that for a second. I go to Dickinson High, and he goes to Howard High. I have a 60% graduation rate. I'm African American. He's at 85. Or he goes to McCain, and I'm at Dickinson. I'm at 60, and he's at 80. Something's happening with the school districts there. We need to be able to change those school districts and how we're teaching our young people. And what we need are more resources. We can't continue to teach young people who have a lot of challenges, both with family backgrounds and historically, to teach them the same way. We've got to change that.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Valenzuela. Good, number 2. All right, could you please describe specifically how you see business partnering with youth advocates and individuals to provide kids who are currently failed by the education system educational system, basic job skills, job training for employment?
We have an example of that in terms of my own experience. I'm a business owner. I am the co-owner of a manufacturing facility in Milford, Delaware. And a few years ago, we sought out an association with Junior Achievement. There is an arm of Junior Achievement up in Wilmington. We wanted to broaden what they were able to do in the state of Delaware. They had an outstanding program, something that was featured in Time magazine as one of the most outstanding junior achievements in the country. So we had good reason to want to share that wealth and to expand what they were able to do. Our business is an example of that. We are partnering with Junior Achievement, offering them space in our manufacturing facility, 13,000 square feet, in an opportunity to connect the youth of our state with entrepreneurial and career path development. That includes, that incorporates the STEM curriculum, science, technology, English and math, and also even incorporates the idea of the arts theme, so that people can get a firm sense of what they'd like to do in their career path in terms of their giftings and talents, and then also what would need to happen as far as skills training and development of core assets so that they could take on the role that they seek as they graduate. One of the things that we're also doing, I'm a member of the Workforce Investment Board, so you have an opportunity to access some of the programs that are available in Delaware and match them up to the opportunities. I see a lot of as a business person, as someone that's engaged with employment, and someone that's on the other side of that trying to connect employers to skilled employees and vice versa. There's a lot of disconnect in terms of the opportunities that the state and federal government offer versus the way in which we connect those dots. And we're only 3 counties in Delaware. We have an opportunity to be a model for the rest of the nation when it comes to connecting people with workforce investment, skills development training, and our young people with career and entrepreneurial paths that are very much based on reality when it comes to what they need to do to prepare for those career paths or entrepreneurial paths. And it's just a matter of better connecting those dots. That's something that I would see, in terms of connecting leaders in Delaware to be able to do business leaders specifically.
Thank you. Pastor D.
Hey,
Do you see similarities in the current alternative programs within the district and independent schools and panel systems? If so, please explain.
Can you repeat the
first of all,
question?
good evening.
I'm sorry.
You can
Repeat the
identify.
question. Do you see similarities in the current alternative programs within the district and independent schools and the panel system? P-now system, I'm sorry.
I say I never been in the panel system. Been in the panel system. First, I think commend the organizers on this diverse panel up here tonight because I'm not accustomed to being one of the participants, and I think it's critical that when we have these kinds of discussions, that we get right down to folks who do the work. So it would be commended. In answer to your question, I do see a similarity in terms of some of the schools, both traditional public, alternative schools specifically, and some of the charter schools and the penal system in a number of ways, all of which I won't chronicle in this opening statement. However, if you take, for instance, the alternative school, it's become, if we're honest, the new juvenile detention center, where kids spend 80% of their time, children spend 80% of their time on a computer, another significant percentage taking field trips, and if you walk into any one of them, the environment is worse than a prison system. And so there are similarities in my view, and I expressed this on WDEL today. I think the front page of the newspaper today answers the question. The patterns of disparity with regard to suspensions and expulsions of thousands of African American children. What Councilman Kelly alluded to earlier, the disparity between the white student, not an African American student, in the suburbs and the black student in the inner city school, that disparity exists because of another reason. That what was on the front page today. If you are suspending African American children at horrific rates with racial patterns unjustly and strapping them up with early childhood criminal records, then you're going to have more white students graduating than you have black students graduating. And so if the one disparity is honestly approached and dealt with, finally, we're a faith Bible. I'm a preacher. We're a faith Bible. I'm biased. I believe that the school came out of the church and not the reverse. I believe that the church or the spiritual institutions, the mosque included, are the institutions that recognize teaching as a spiritual force. In fact, we're the only institution that recognizes teaching beyond the profession as a gift. And so in our setting, you got to be gifted to teach anything. In the school setting, all you need is the certificate or the credibility, whether you have the passion or the love and the interest in children. Finally, if we don't penetrate this political clique, I often refer to it in anger, a lot of leadership by doing it, this blackballing of people with services. I see Kirk here. We were fortunate to conduct a program called SELECT, Cognitive Emotional Learning and Esteem Building Process in the Red Clay Consolidated School District. Identified 65 children who are supposed to be predisposed to be suspended, straight from the hood. We work with them on the governor's challenge to me. We work with them and succeed. And we'll see to it that your program is in every school in this state, because doggone it, we got to help these kids. We did work with them. We did succeed. On the front row was a young lady who was not only on the suspension list, over 4 times, but also had numerous assaults. She now rides the honor roll in that same school district. But wait a minute. The promise to expand our program was never kept. Not because we were not effective, but because there's this closed clique or cluster of individuals who are approved of based on personality rather than the principle of helping children, and that's what we got to fight in this state to help children.
Absolutely. Now we're going to go to Dr. Castle for some statistical data on, Delaware was one of 2 states to receive race to the top funding for education. Is there any available data on this progress?
Okay, no, I can do that, but I'm supposed to,
I'm skipping.
okay.
You're skipping,
Oh,
it's
you're
coming back
skipping,
to
okay, all right, I just want to make sure I have the same.
Because I'm trying to stay on topic.
Yes, Race to the Top, Delaware is one of 2, the first 2 to receive this funding. And just a little bit about where I come from. I believe that once you start an initiative, that's when the evaluation begins. Okay, you plan, you do, you study, and then you act, and then you change what is not working. My take on what has happened with Race to the Top is there's a lot of oversight about what's being done. We're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. I really have not come across or have been provided, albeit it asked, any information regarding analysis of results. All right. So it's still out there. One aspect of an evaluation was to get feedback from teachers who were participating in one of the initiatives, which is data coaches. These teachers receive training on how to use data and then apply it into the classroom. To me, as an evaluator, that has bias to it, unless you are very careful, because it's a personal a personal opinion. And also, there has been no profiling of what teachers gave feedback. So you're not clear, are these teachers who are doing well? And typically, people who are doing well respond to surveys. People who don't like the program or unhappy usually don't. So you always have to look, at these other aspects of the evaluation. Having first-hand experience with the federal government and in evaluating initiatives, I was an evaluator of an initiative. I kept giving information back that it wasn't working, and it still was funded. So I have lots of questions. I don't have very specific evidence, but I have more questions.
Mr. Simpson, please briefly describe the need for retention programs for higher education for minority men and others.
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. Essentially, I'll just start by saying I'm in my 11th year working at Lincoln University, 8 years director of career services. I am a product of California public school systems. I grew up here. Connection to Lincoln and to Rodney Street. One of the things, when we talk about retention programs, I'm going to get a little more specific than just general retention. On my end, one of the key things that we've done successfully at Lincoln, particularly at the freshman and sophomore level, is to use the Myers-Briggs Career Assessment. Because we have a number of students that come into Lincoln from a career perspective who are obviously undecided, but beyond that, not only undecided in terms of their major, but undecided in terms of their career. We use an assessment that has been successful for at least half of the students, and basically no longer undecided. And that's a tremendous asset for a student to be able to say, here's the path I want to take career-wise, and then I will tell the student, based on their career, here are the 3 or 4 majors at Lincoln that are most directly correlated. So that's been very successful, particularly over the last 3 years. Now, let me give you a little bit of demographics about Lincoln, because Delaware is not one of our larger states in terms of representation. Lincoln University, approximately 60% of our students, give or take a few percentage points in the year, come from single-parent households. We are approximately 92% African American. 60% of our students come from either the city of Philadelphia, West Philly, North Philly, or surrounding areas that would include Coatesville, Chester, PA, Camden, New Jersey. Another 20% of our students are coming in from New York City, particularly the Bronx and Brooklyn, as well as the northern New Jersey area, Newark, Patterson, Elizabeth, and the like. Another 10% from the Baltimore, D.C. area, another 8% from who are international. So that would be something that I would, basically the assessment that we use requires the student only to be at the 9th grade level. Okay. Now, they might say, well, that's easy because it's in college, but there have been years, I've been at Lincoln, where we've had freshman classes where 2/3 of the entering students were reading at an 8th or 9th grade level coming in to college. So of course, if you're not at the 9th grade level, then they're not going to understand the questions that are being asked because of some of the words and diction involved. So then it's very difficult for me to coach them. So career, finding out your favorite subjects, matching that with your career, and then coaching them on what elective courses to take that will complement their major. For example, Arabic is one language we offer at Lincoln, critical for numerous employers that have career paths that will take students, and have taken our students to six-figure incomes in little, 4 or 5 years time period. So I'll leave it at that.
Councilman Street, based on your years of legal filings against district and charter schools and even the Delaware Board of Education, what would you say are overwhelming themes with the education of minorities and low-income children? And what do you envision as the ideal educational environment?
Well, I'm not sure I know how to answer that question. I received it in advance. But I think I want to talk about why we're here and what the real purpose of this is. And the real purpose of this is to sell this. Sell choice, convince you that we need to go with choice. This is the end-all, the cure-all. And me being an anti-choice, anti-charter person, part of it was put together to put me on the spot, since I have been and will continue to be opposed to this concept. I was late tonight because I'm on the phone with a parent who choiced her child into one of these so-called charter schools. And the charter school, the child's 13 years old. The child has been out of school without services since the beginning of the month, and that's a special needs child. Oh, he going back to school. But see, they will tell you they love you from the beginning, and when they collect the $10,000, they will treat you differently and more adversely than the public schools at this point so much as contemplate. As we speak, not last week, not last year, right now, on my desk is a student in one of the local school districts who, quote, choice, found some marijuana on him in the bathroom. They didn't run him through the expulsion process. They didn't run him through the discipline process. They de-choiced him. So he's out of school without services. If you want to know what my view is, I made it real crystal clear, county council adopted. This is my plan to reduce the violence in and around the city of Wilmington. It came out in 4 months after I was in office and was adopted by county council, and I don't care what anybody says, not for this document. This document from the Hope Commission would have never been created because this was the genesis of the establishment of the Hope Commission. For 38 years, the two I have worked diligently and will continue to do so, crime and education are directly linked. The children that we fail to educate today are destined to be our criminals tomorrow. Is it broken? Yes. Does it need to be fixed? Yes. Can we fix it? Yes. Are we going to fix it with choice and vouchers? In my view, no.
You said something, but you didn't answer my question.
Intentionally.
I'm gonna come back to you.
That's not a good idea.
Alright, we're here for solutions. So what is your ideal solution? We're not here saying yes to choice, because
Well,
we don't want yes men.
So you want me to pluck the utopia of the school system out of the air. So
What
what I would tell you is that I am going to continue to fight in order for the school system to be properly run. It has to be fair and equitable, have the appropriate resources necessary to educate children from all walks of life and give them the ability to pursue whatever dream that they want to pursue. The primary prerequisite for a child learning in a classroom is that child has to believe that the person in front of him or her actually genuinely cares about him or her. And the likelihood of us finding that completely in this school system or in a choice school system or in a voucher school system is slim to none. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
sir.
Thank you.
I agree with 100%.
Now I'm in trouble.
No, you ain't.
Oh, we're halfway in, so for the people in the audience, if you have questions, there's notepads and pencils, pens, markers. Start jotting your stuff down so we can just hit them up after we're done.
I want to
Not
ask
yet.
my own question.
Well, not yet. Not yet. Just give me marinated.
The stew's cooking.
All right, let's go to Pastor D.
Yes, sir.
Please talk a little bit about how your youth ministry and you in particular have worked inside schools, where you kind of hit on that last question, in communities to assist parents with behavior issues with young males and others, particularly in low-income areas. So that's part A. In your opinion, is the that's not.
Earlier, I alluded to the SELED program, which is the cognitive emotional learning and esteem building process. Many years ago, when I was a kid and his hair was still gray. I was a teenage member of a group called Coalition to Save Our Children, under the leadership of a real radical fellow named Jay Street. And one of the things they understood about us was they needed to understand about us. And so I'm talking about young people. I take that same approach with young people today. I said on WBEL today that the districts needed to take into consideration hip-hop culture and the hip-hop industry. 15 white folk called in, angry. What are you talking about? Hip-hop, we don't need to be free. Let me tell you something. You can hardly buy toothpaste without a hip-hop beat. So it's good enough for the industry to market clothes. It impacts language. It impacts fashion, the cultural implications of the hip-hop era. Yet in schools, we are either afraid or ill-equipped to utilize it as a methodical approach to teaching. So what we've done in the SELED program, when you say how have I personally, I'm tired of responding to crisis situations. I'm tired of them hiring Joe Muppety Muppet Professor Don't Know Nothing from the Birds and paying him $100,000 to be the disruptive and delinquent student officer and then calling Pastor B when somebody take a hostage. I say that there are a number of those of us in the community and a number of people who are not being considered and given an opportunity to participate. So the way we developed our ministry and a lot of the young people, some of the young people, a few of them are here today by engaging them, by understanding their language, and then by training them, encouraging them to succeed, and to Jay's point, which is absolutely accurate, because they know Pastor D's cares, they don't care what some other adult's opinion is of the person who's feeding them and providing them with positive direction. How it's impacted families in the community, you ask. Well, when you care about the child, I wouldn't care if mom is on crack. Do you know the population in my church increased not because of theological expertise, but because young people are coming there, and parents are coming to see why I'm successful with their children. They do love their children and oftentimes feel ill-equipped in order to help them. So when we reach the child, we'll reach the family, because the child really does have the heart of the parent and really does have the heart of the family.
And on that note, Ms. Valenzuela, briefly describe possible ways you believe would bolster parent involvement, especially among young low-income residents, as well as counseling and sensitive training for educators to deal with socially polarized children.
I think as I'm listening to the discussion tonight, I'm hearing that we, at the end of all of it, we agree that things need to change.
Absolutely.
That we're not getting what we need to get as parents. We're certainly not getting that as educators who care about teaching, those who truly care about teaching. In my own experience, and I want to reference this, I've got, as a way of answering this question, I've got two disabled children. My middle child is autistic and at a very young age was told he would never read, write, or communicate effectively. And I'm glad at that age we sought another path that would allow an expansion of an outcome. But in high school, he was continually swimming upstream in terms of his outcome. Yes, he has special circumstances, a different way of learning, and there are people that are exploding on the learning disability spectrum right now, from learning disabilities to severe autism. That number is exploding, and for reasons we can have another panel discussion about that sometime. But the idea that he was told point blank by a group of professionals around the table that you will never do anything more than push a broom. And at that point in time, and I give him all the credit in the world, he did not say a word to the people that were giving him this dismal outcome. But he decided on his own at 17 to sue the district. And he took this on when he got the notice in the mail saying Simon Valenzuela versus the school district. I said, how do you feel? He said, they're outnumbered. And he prevailed. Now he and these students teach us a great deal as parents, as community members, and I think that we can all agree the time for discussing this is over. We are very good at discussing what we've already talked about as parents, as educators, talking about the outcome we're receiving for some of the highest cost per student in the nation. If you can agree that you're getting that as a parent, or that the students that you know are receiving that level of education, one of two in the nation that receive Race to the Top funds, that actually handcuffs those who care about teaching because of the reporting requirements. Teachers that are tied to outcomes they can't even adequately describe because the outcomes aren't clearly defined. No one can achieve goals for student success without clearly understanding what those goals are. But you, the taxpayer, are paying for a great deal of money per student. And if you're not achieving that in an outcome, the time to take back our schools is today. The time to engage parents with some of that money in terms of different ways in approaching those issues, taking the handcuffs off teachers so they can be more adequately engaged in the process, that parents and community members, ministers, are driving, then we can have a different kind of outcome because we are in charge and we need to take the helm of what we are in charge of, but haven't yet stepped into that arena.
Mr. Lacy,
Yes, sir.
Can you please speak about the importance of before and after school programs and the need for public and private funding and long-term commitments in private sector partnerships?
Well, I mean, after-school program is essential, it's imperative that we have these programs. If you just look around the city, we have record numbers of killings. It's been going on for 20 years now. You know, people can talk politics, be it Republican or Democrat. We have a huge problem in our state. There's something, you know, drastically wrong when we put more money into Department of Corrections and not enough money into education. You know, that's the state of Delaware's way. So when people start, you know, talking, you know, partisan politics, it doesn't mean anything. We've had a Democratic governor and rule for the last 20 years, but look at the mess we have. You know, after-school programs are cut, mainly from the federal government. So it doesn't trickle down in the states where it's most needed. You know, our kids are forced to go into the streets with nowhere to go. You know what I mean? But they kick them out of school, they send them to alternative programs, and they basically serve as pipelines of prison, in my opinion. The partnerships is very important, but there's, you know, under these economic circumstances, it's just not enough money going around. There's no money. You know, people give what they can, and they can't give what they don't have. But we definitely need money. We need to establish more partnerships. And one of the biggest problems is the lack of parental participation in the school. We can sit here and talk about, you know, all the things that are wrong. But when you go to a PTA meeting, you got 5 parents from our communities who don't participate in the process. So, you know, until we educate and mobilize the parents to be more involved in the process, then we're going to have these problems.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Castle, what does the statistical data show regarding the importance of providing K-3 solid reading and math?
A study was done by the, 2 studies actually, by the Annie Casey Foundation. And I encourage you all to just go to that website. It's Baltimore-based and they have a focus on children's well-being. And the studies that they conducted, it was done over time, which we call longitudinal study, showed the high importance of 3rd grade reading proficiency. And if you're not proficient, a child is not proficient, they are much more likely to drop out of high school. And very unlikely, even more unlikely to complete high school on time. So making sure that that threshold, K-3, is solid, is critical, and it is a preventive solution. We're talking about solutions. While we're trying to fix up all the mess that's out there, we need to be preventive. I've done an analysis of all the 3rd grades across the state of Delaware, and it's not a really good picture. And I've done it also of charter schools and traditional. And there are some schools that are doing a real good job, and Kumba Academy, don't want to just highlight that, but that is a stellar performing school. They have 80+% of their 3rd graders proficient. So you can see there's a road to success. Then I'm looking at schools, and I'd be curious about some of the schools that you have children in, where there are schools that have 72% of their 3rd graders not proficient in reading. 72%. 72%. Some of them in the 60%. So, and some of the charter schools are not doing that. So that is where we have to focus, and that's the best.
That's right. Exactly.
I hope we crossfire, because I'm tired of you all that know this stuff for years, telling us where we got to focus when you want to come to the community and want us to vote one way or another way on the referendum, or buy into y'all spending our money in another way. It's time that we focus on what we know to be the problem. I just heard you tonight. So if you've been doing all these studies and all of this information, and I've been in the school working, and we need to come to a place where we are in the room at the table, because we don't know if the information, with all due respect, she just quoted to us, is true, false, or in between. We need to know what the reality is regarding our children. We need to know whose master serves who, and we need to understand what kinds of situations we're being pulled into before we champion any cause, because that's how we get duped all the time.
And that's why we're having this, so we can get involved, be informed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Action without information is stupidity.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I just don't agree with the information, because if you go to East Side Charter, the only accurate information I heard was Coomba Academy, which is the pride of this city, as it should be, and should be receiving a great deal more financial assistance. It's amazing to me that they know this, yet I don't read about Coomba receiving the
So
kinds of
let's go
assistance.
and see what the aftermath is. We're gonna go to Mr.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Rebuttal.
right. It's available. All the information about each side, about any charter school, any public school is all available on the Delaware Department of Education. You just go to school profiles, you hit it, it will tell you what are the achievements across grades, it will tell you suspension rates, it will tell you, how much, the teacher's experiences. So it is available there. And some of the, as I've said, some of the charter schools are doing well, some are not. Some of the public schools are doing well, some are not. There is one district, Aquaquinmet, which is pretty consistently doing a real good job with this focus on third grade. Red Clay has a lot of problems going on, a lot. 10 of their schools have third grades that have 40% or more children not proficient. So it's the data, the information is a way to use the leaders to bring about the change.
But isn't it the fact?
Wait. Stop. You can't, I gotta stay focused. I'm coming to you.
Thank you.
I know I should have stopped it then, but I got you. Grab the ring again. Mr. Simpson, based on your observation, can you give an example of how many minority males complete undergraduate studies within the allotted time, and how many who enroll in your school drop out, and what issues cause them?
I'll speak to retention rates, and let me just tell you that at the collegiate level, retention rates are usually measured in two categories. You have 4 years, and you have 6 years. Okay. My sense is, in terms of allotted time, I would define allotted time as 5 years or less. Okay. And the reason I don't necessarily accept 4 years as the reasonable allotted time is because that standard was instituted before two things became what is now considered ideal or a regular occurrence within the college education system. And that's number one, co-ops or internships, and number two, spending a semester studying outside the United States. And then three, in most of the STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, and math, a lot of these bachelor's programs are designed as 5-year programs anyway. With that said, Lincoln University over the last 3 to 5 years has been between a retention rate of 39% and 44%. Okay, and that's in terms of percentage of freshmen that end up graduating both at the 4-year time frame and the 6-year time frame. What causes that? Well, some of it is academically related. If we're going to have classes coming in where 60% are at the 8th or 9th grade level reading-wise, and probably math is similar, then that's going to pose some problems. At Lincoln, we are understaffed in a lot of areas. Pennsylvania has had Governor Corbett has had consistent budget cutbacks in our state over the last 2 to 3 years. And so we're doing everything we can not to try and cut any jobs. And in many cases, you have departments that are operating on skeleton crews as it is, including my own. But that's just one side of the story. support at home, and I heard the gentleman down here, and I don't just say parents, because we have so many households where we have single-parent homes, and a lot of times, the parents, the kids were the ones that were heads of the household, not necessarily the parents. And there's all kinds of dynamics on why that is, but essentially, if it were not for the support of my parents, there's no way that I would have been able to navigate through my own high school and middle school experience in terms of whether I wasn't getting the classes that I was asking for. I was trying to get into AP, and the counselor would not put in. My dad had to go all the way to the superintendent of the district before that got changed around. But if you have parents who are out, are unable to do that, whether it's from a mental health standpoint, whether it's from a lack of knowledge or exposure, or the other thing is if you have a parent that's working 2 or 3 jobs, just to try and just to pay the bills or whatever, then they're not going to have time to show up to those PTA meetings that are so desperately needed. So home support is another major reason why we lose students. Of course, the third reason is financial. Lincoln University does its best to provide as many academic scholarships as possible. We also try to help students through career services by linking them up with internships at private sector or government firms that, if the student performs well, that firm will then sponsor the rest of their education. Okay, and that doesn't happen as much as we'd like to see, but certainly those are things that we try to do. But those are the major reasons that we lose students at Lincoln. So to go back to what I was talking about earlier, that with the career assessment, that's one piece that we instituted to try and catch these students so at least they can do well, get a B average that first semester, so that we can then start marketing them to organizations. Second thing, we have an expansive tutoring program for reading and math called the Learning Resource Center. And in fact, they're a floor just below where I am. And so a lot of times we'll have peer tutors, students tutoring other students, math and reading to improve their skills there. We have some science as well. So those are some of the things that we try to do to save the students. But usually in terms of the students that we lose, those are the 4 reasons why.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
local government is the last stop government funds are allocated. What are your views on current policy regarding education budgets? Do you see any areas of improvement?
Well, there's a lot of debate whether the city of Wilmington should have its own school district, and I'm not a proponent of that. I believe our students should be treated like anyone else. Unfortunately, in the city of Wilmington, we don't have any budgetary decisions in the school district. But what we need is a stronger advocacy for education. We really need to be able to have someone in the city hall, and I'll give Mr. Williams the opportunity, he's coming to be mayor, to give him some opportunity to see what he wants to do to address young people. City council has always been an advocate of providing programs, but what city government can do is, one, and first and foremost, make neighborhoods safer. Because if young people aren't safe, they don't want to learn. They're scared to learn, they're scared to go out and do things. Second, we have to provide more opportunities for them to be able to have some recreation to go out. Listen, if it wasn't for me being in Pulaski School every day with Mr. Dorman and my man Bertie Watson back there playing ball, who knows where I would end up if I had somebody who was looking out for me. More on the education, I think what we've got to look at is advocate for realigning the school districts. We're starting with 3 school districts. I have a kid that lives at 100 blocks South Clayton and 100 North Clayton. One's in Christine and one's in Red Clay. One goes to school K through 8 in their neighborhood that's got to go on the bus to go to GI or Glasgow or Newark. The other goes a little bit local. We need to realign our school districts so they're a little bit closer to be able to do it. We need to be able to look at the school board elections. Ladies and gentlemen, school boards control everything we're talking about.
Right.
They have more influence than any politician, any governor. They're the ones that set policies and rules. City of Wilmington, we've got to compete with people from Newark and everywhere else who are on school boards. It's tough for us to get somebody on a school board who's going to look out for us. And we have to realign these dollars. Mr. Street said school districts get $10,000 on September 30th. So if I'm in school September 30th, there's $10,000. I roll the next day, they're still not coming out to get me. But we've got to be able to put our collective energy into education. The previous past day, him and I ran for mayor and bunch. We spin our heads about a lot of issues in the city of Wilmington.
And that was deeply.
What's that?
That was deeply.
I know. I know. You did a pretty nice thing. It all happens, it's all good. But, you know, we've got to put our collective energy into education. That's what it's all